From an overload of content to some shockingly mediocre movies, Phase 4 of the MCU wasn't exactly a resounding success. And anyone who was hoping Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania would turn things around was left disappointed too. It looks like Marvel Studios is taking stock of their situation and are looking for ways to turn things around. I want to help them out today, starting with the truckload of new characters introduced in the past few years. The reason why I chose this as my starting point is because I get it, coming out of Avengers Endgame, Marvel Studios had a huge issue with characters. In trying to give the right amount of screen time to stalwarts like Captain America and Iron Man, the next generation of MCU heroes took a back seat. And with some of the key figures of the MCU gone or on their way out, Marvel needs to replace them. They had some successes in Phase 4. Despite the overall reception of Black Widow, people generally like Yelena Belova as a replacement for Natasha Romanoff. Same deal with Yelena's BFF Kate Bishop in Hawkeye. And Shang-Chi's movie was a success that probably even surprised Marvel Studios. But on the other hand, people just didn't resonate with the gaggle of supers introduced in Eternals. Moon Knight didn't make enough of an impression on the general audience either. As for She-Hulk and Ms. Marvel, their characters are too mired in controversy. On top of all those problems, Marvel has so many new characters out now that they can't juggle them all, especially since their actual strategy is to push the Infinity Saga's sidecast into the spotlight going forward. We're going to see a repeat of the mistakes that Marvel made in the first era of the franchise. The problem, by the way, isn't limited to the good guys. We're starting to see a villain problem in the franchise too. Just like with the heroes, some of the villains really ticked off the fans. People hated what the movies did to Taskmaster and Gore the God Butcher in Black Widow and Thor: Love and Thunder, respectively. Meanwhile, the use of old Spider-Man movie villains in No Way Home was really good. Except that means the MCU itself will never get to come up with their own versions. There were also some strong villains. Arishem and the Celestials were terrifying enough in Eternals, and Namor was a brilliant follow-up to Killmonger. I think most Marvel fans will agree that it'd be great to see more of them in the future. But again, they'll have to be sidelined because the next half-decade of Marvel movies has to be about Kang. That would have been okay if we had a great sense of what Kang's deal was. The problem is that Kang isn't very solidly defined as a character. On the TV front, the Loki show had one major goal, and that goal was shared by Quantumania on the big screen. Both of these projects were supposed to introduce us to Kang the Conqueror. Kang is meant to be the overarching villain of the multiverse saga, the new Thanos, as it were. Marvel is taking a different approach with Kang than they did with Thanos. While Thanos only ever appeared in cameos before Infinity War, Kang is already getting into fights with our heroes. That's good. I wouldn't want Kang to be a repeat of Thanos. The problem is that Kang in his two appearances has been completely different in the wrong ways, and exactly the same in the wrong ways too. Marvel was trying to show the unique selling point of Kang, his variants. He Who Remains, the guy we meet in Loki, was very different from the Kang we meet in Quantumania. They're essentially two different characters who happen to be played by the same actor, and yet their roles in these projects were exactly the same. Both these guys told their protagonists about the threat to the multiverse. Both warned them about the existence of other Kang variants. And both tried to convince the heroes that they themselves were the least of all evils. In two appearances, we haven't actually learned all that much about Kang, and this problem is gonna get worse, as the multiverse saga is really all over the place. Back at San Diego Comic-Con last year, Marvel Studios unveiled their roadmaps for Phase 4, 5, and 6 of the franchise. With Phase 4 in the rear view, let's take a look at the 5th and 6th phases. You can see that there's a big problem here. On the big screen, it's only the Marvels that might follow up on the story of the multiverse. On Disney+, Loki will continue to carry the torch of the story, with the possible inclusion of What If and Agatha: Coven of Chaos. Phase 6, which will kick off in November 2024, has a lot of empty spots right now. We can assume that those will be filled up almost entirely with multiverse projects. Does that mean we'll have to wait a year and a half to see Kang again? That's what it looks like. And why is the multiverse story being shoved into the background of the MCU? Well, it's because Phase 5 is more concerned with the storyline being set up with Valentina and the Thunderbolts. Also, we're giving entire shows to Ironheart, Echo, and Agatha for some reason. This doesn't really feel like a multiverse saga. And Marvel is seriously risking losing the audience's interest in the story. But I'm not here to just point out Marvel's problems. Here's how I think Marvel Studios can solve them. We should definitely start by reducing the sheer volume of MCU content. Last year's strategy of having an MCU release every month was a fun experiment, but it was a botch. It looks like Marvel Studios has taken notice of this as well. They recently delayed the Marvels all the way to November of this year. That means that after Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, we won't have a Marvel movie for a good long while, and the Marvels will be followed up by Captain America: New World Order next May. I genuinely believe that this is the right way to schedule Phase 5. Similarly, on the topic of TV, I think the Loki show needs to come out ASAP so that the audience remains interested in the multiverse story. Secret Invasion, meanwhile, can fit somewhere between Guardians and the Marvels to remind people the MCU exists. All these other shows, though, can buzz off till 2024. We can have, at most, one of them in the fall or winter. Delaying shows is one thing, though. I have a much more indecent proposal for y'all. I say we need to can some of these shows. I get that people liked Riri Williams in Wakanda Forever, and that Agatha All Along song was a real bop. But do we seriously need Ironheart and Agatha to have their own TV shows? Even more egregious than those is the Echo show, whose only selling point is featuring Daredevil and Kingpin. It's a bad sign where people are interested in a show because of side characters, rather than the main character. So I say, let's do away with Ironheart, Agatha, and Echo's TV shows, and continue their storylines elsewhere. We know that Armor Wars is coming out, so we can continue Riri's story there. Echo, meanwhile, can fit into Daredevil Born Again. As for Agatha, anyone who wants more of her can basically just play the song on repeat. The time, content slots, and budget saved from these shows should be put towards developing the characters introduced in Phase 4. I don't mean to offend Kevin Feige, but to quote a certain purple giant, the hardest choices require the strongest wills. And that's all I have for the MCU's biggest problems that Phase 5 needs to fix.